Jesus, someone's angry.
Sir, how do you know the laws of logic are true? Without
How do I know?
presupposing the laws of logic?
How do I know the laws of logic are true?
Yeah, without presupposing them. Do you think that you can account for them? Like, you think you can explain them? Why they're true? Or do you just presuppose them in your worldview?
I mean, God and Scripture are ontologically prior, so that's
Ontologically prior to the laws of logic?
Yes.
No, you're a presuppositional. You're supposed to say that the laws of logic are grounded in God's nature, but that's just an assertion.
Well, I'm not. I don't think that I don't think that God's nature or essence is knowable in any way. I think he's totally beyond concepts like being and logic and reason.
You don't think it's in God's nature to be logical?
No, I think that logic is something that emanates from him. I don't think he is entirely beyond, his essence is entirely beyond comprehension. So things like logic and being are what we would call the divine energies of God, or they're the logos manifest in creation. And so I think that your access to logic is access directly to God. You might not believe that, but on my paradigm, that's what it is.
This dude's insane.
Yeah, this is.
You call me insane,
it's a nice
bro,
story,
but I don't hear you
no argument.
your worldview up for any type of scrutiny.
Look, you just said
this is a nice story you're telling us, but it has absolutely no weight to it.
He just said that God was both God and not God at the same time, in the same way, in the same place.
In no way did I say that.
You said that God is ontologically prior to the laws of logic.
Yes, I did. I said logic. I also said that logic is something, and reason are things that emanate or move outward from his being.
How do you know that when you know nothing about this God, but yet you know logic?
That means nothing. Wait, look, logic emanating from him means nothing. Explain what that means to me.
In my worldview, logic is an energy of God.
What do you mean by energy?
Just ask me if God can be God.
It's an operation of an action of God in the world, a manifestation of God in creation.
So logic is a manifestation.
Energy is a physical thing that we can measure.
It's a manifestation of his energies, not his essence.
You just speaking gobbledygook. You're literally saying nothing right now.
Yes.
Could it be the case that God exists and God doesn't exist?
No, that can't be the case.
Yeah, but God is prior to the laws of logic, which state that it is the case, right? So how is that not the case?
You're saying that because you're assuming that
Isn't
because
it a law of logic
prior
that
to
has
the
that,
law
that answers that question that comes after God? So what if God didn't exist? What if God existed and not existed?
At the same time.
That's you guys are assuming that you guys are assuming that because I'm saying that logic emanates from God, therefore I think that logic is somehow not binding.
What?
I don't
Something
think
binds
that
God
things
that
can
came from him?
contradict, and you guys are trying to put it on like I think things contradict.
Is the Christian God dependent on the laws of logic?
And I don't think anything I've said necessitates that I believe in contradictions.
God dependent on the laws
What
of
have I
logic?
said that necessitates I believe in contradictions?
Well, you have to.
Why does the statement?
You have to say something
God
that
is
makes sense for it to be a contradiction. If you're just saying
you
God
guys are trying to say that I'm contradicting. That's what that guy just said. He just tried to say that God could exist and not exist.
Yeah, he could, right? Because the laws of logic
he
can happen.
couldn't. That's
How can he
absurd.
not?
That's absurd.
It's only absurd with the laws of logic that came before God. So before God had the laws of logic, was it absurd?
Before God had the laws of logic,
Yeah, it emanated from him, right? So
sense.
there must have been something prior to the emanation.
No. God is an eternal being. We don't think that in eternity things come
You
into
said
being.
prior. What did you mean by prior?
I said ontologically prior. I didn't mean temporally prior.
What do you mean by ontologically prior?
His being, his it is what he is, the source of, the fountainhead of logic.
What?
And then that logic constrains him. How? He's the fucking source of it. How is it constraining him?
In my worldview, these divine energies are wholly God, but they're not his essence.
You gotta stop saying divine energy.
Divine energies are the archetypes and patterns of creation. That's what they are in my theology.
It's just all meaningless.
What's an archetype? What's a model? What's a pattern?
Chopra shit right here.
What's an archetype? What's a model? What's a pattern? Do any of those words mean anything to you?
What
Archetype?
words mean? We don't know. We don't know what it means.
A typical example of certain, or a thing, a model, an original that has been imitated, something of that nature. Those words don't mean anything. I'm not using English.
When you
A
use the
divine
word.
energy is the logos in my version, in what I've come to believe. The logos is manifest in creation as the logoi, or
can the laws of logic both emanate from God and not emanate from God?
No, dude.
Why not?
Why not? Because the logic itself is an eternal divine energy of God.
How is that a response?
What the fuck?
That's such bullshit that Tom gets the coolest one.
Weird to say that.
That was the gayest one.
False.
Tom, apparently logic is a divine energy of God.
Standard.
You know that chocolate is an octave.
Did you say God was
of
an
sun
archetype?
energy?
No,
This is
he said that son's not. I don't know. He's an idiot. Yes, Gabble slaps frog.
Okay, guys. So an activity that involves motion is one that moves towards an end. Aristotle's example of this is building a house. Energeia, or energy, on the other hand, is an activity that is its own end. His example of this is sight. The object of the act of seeing is to see. So when I talk about divine energy, I'm talking about the operations or actions of God in the world. And God acts in this way, in the same way that sight is. The object of God's actions are their own end.
We have a
Logic,
frontier man.
being, reason, these things are actions of God in the world.
Why does God do this to people? He changes so many people to be insane.
Well, you're
Well, no,
saying
sure.
that I'm insane, dude, but I think your worldview's insane. That's my point. But none of you guys
keep saying that, but you haven't shown anything.
You want to sit
They're
here.
literally just making shit up.
I'm not, dude. This is 2,000 years worth of theology.
Faceless interview this guy.
But
fuck
like,
that.
none of you guys want to put your
You
views
said the
up
laws
for
of logic, that it's a divine energy, and energy is something in motion. So the laws of logic are something in motion.
That's not what I said. No,
And
that
then-
is not
yeah,
what I
it
said.
is. And then
No,
you
it's
also
not.
said,
No, it's
look.
not.
You
No,
also
you're
said, never mind that,
misrepresenting.
sir.
I'm
Look,
not
you
gonna let
also
you straw
said,
man.
you
No, I'm not
also
gonna let you straw
defined
man.
logic.
Sorry,
You
no
also
straw man for
defined-
you.
Sir,
Sorry,
calm
no
down.
straw.
Sir,
Nope, you're
calm
very
down.
rude. You're trying to come
Please
here
calm
and straw
down.
man.
Please
Nope,
calm down.
nope,
Please
not
calm down.
shooting your straw man. Sorry, not
Sir.
playing with your straw man.
Do you know what a
Sir,
straw man
You
is?
also
Yeah,
defined
she
logic
misrepresented
as
my argument. Now she's
Yeah,
you also-
misrepresenting somebody is not a straw man.
And
Look,
then
you
she just tried
you
to
also
attack, say
said
my
that
argument
what
was wrong because
you
of a
also-
No, she has not said that your argument was
Yes,
wrong.
she did. She just said that
No,
she
she
hasn't
just
given an argument.
Yes, she did.
I didn't say your argument is wrong because you haven't given an argument. You're just making
God,
claims.
you're being
But
dumb.
you said that logic is God's interaction with the world, right? Is that what you said?
It is an
So-
action or operation of God in the world. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. So what about prior to the universe, when without the universe, when God hadn't done any actions? If logic is eternal according to you, then how can it be God's actions if it existed before God ever acted? You idiot!
Okay. Well, if you had actually listened, you would have heard that I said that God's activity is activity that is its own end. God is an eternal being. My example of this in reality was sight. God's actions are eternal, and they are their own. Logic is an eternal energy of God.
So logic is an energy then.
What actions did he do before he created the universe? He's whacking off or something?
Again, this comes down to the fact that I think there are immaterial and spiritual aspects of the world.
So what God's
We have
actions?
two totally different paradigms, and I would love to sit here and unpack both of our paradigms. But I don't think it's going to get us anywhere, because there are massive presuppositions that we both hold that are entirely at odds with one another.
Why would that not?
Earlier, you had said something along the lines that the only way you can make sense of the world is if there's a God. How is that any different than saying the only way I can make sense of the world is if my presuppositions are true?
It's a transcendent
question,
argument. It's a transcendent argument, man. So
Well,
It's not an argument, it's an assertion.
When you said that it was a transcendent argument earlier, you gave it, and it wasn't actually a transcendent argument. It was merely an assertion.
What's the first premise?
it's not a premise argument. It's not like that.
You
It's
don't
more of
have
a
an argument in the form of premises and a conclusion?
Then what the fuck is it?
It's more of a linguistic type of philosophy, dude. I'm just trying to have a conversation with you guys.
Are you
I'm
just
not
saying you
here
don't
to-
have an argument? Are you saying you don't have an argument?
I'm telling you that I can't adequately give you what you want right now. But I'm willing to sit here and discuss this with you guys.
What,
If you guys
okay, then when you say argument, what is it you're meaning? Because it's not the traditional meaning of argument.
I mean, so my claim is that there's let's see if I can do this. When I say that I'm making a transcendental argument, what I mean is that there's something P that is a necessary condition for the possibility of Y. And
Yeah, why
for
should we think
me,
that?
for
Why should we accept
me,
Well, no, you can stop right there actually, because how is that any different than
Okay,
P being
so-
my presupposition?
well, I mean, so you guys are asking me why I think that God is a necessary possibility of.
No, I'm asking you, how is that any different than P equaling my presuppositions?
How is the idea that P is a necessary condition for the possibility of Q?
Yes, and
That's
much like the necessary preconditions for rationality are my presuppositions.
what is, when you hear the word necessary condition, what are you taking that to mean?
I'm not using any esoteric language here. I'm just using the standard.
Well, I mean,
definition.
I said it, so I'm trying to understand if we're understanding each other correctly. So, like, when I say P is a necessary condition for,
Right.
for the possibility of something, what do you think that means? So, like, I would say, like, meaning must necessarily exist for the possibility of language.
Yeah, it can't exist without it. That's what it means. A
Yeah,
necessary
that's fair, right?
Yeah. So you're just presupposing that you can't have meaning without God. So that doesn't answer Van's question.
Well, I mean, I thought me and him were talking about what I meant by a transcendental argument. He asked me the question of how that was different from just presupposing something. And I think you just said it was fair to say that meaning is a necessary condition of the possibility of language. And what I'm telling you guys that I think is a good argument that I'm trying to formulate right now, but I'm nowhere near there yet. But you guys actually are all very intelligent, and you're helping me get there. So that's why I'm coming back to this.
You think
You gotta stop saying argument.
But like, okay, dude, that's fine. My current thoughts, is that better?
Well, it's just you're not making an argument. You might be making a claim.
Well, I'm trying to work out a transcendental argument for God on the basis that God is a necessary condition for the intelligibility of human experience.
Hey, Perichoris, can you tell me the number of presuppositions in the sentence I presuppose the necessary existence of God for the rationality of your life, the intelligibility of life, the logic of
Well,
the
Kathleen, when
universe?
you assert that you're presupposing the laws of logic are true, you're presupposing meaning is possible, you're presupposing that your cognitive faculties are reliable.
Causality.
Well, you're also making presuppositions.
In what way do I presuppose? When I say that God is a necessary precondition for the intelligibility of human experience, how am I presupposing any of those things?
Well, you'll first of all, when you presuppose God, you presuppose that God is intelligent as well. You presuppose that God is rational. You presuppose that God is logical. You presuppose that God is merciful. You presuppose that God is just. You presuppose that God is continual. That
You're presupposing that your cognitive faculties are reliably relaying this information to you, and you're actually perceiving this correct.
You're also presupposing that.
Well, you guys are telling. Pick one presupposition and tell me how I'm doing.
Well,
but
that's the problem, right? This is the problem that I've run into, right? Is so when we say we presuppose God, which I do, by the way, presuppose God. That comes along with what I have counted to be 97 internal presuppositions, just in that one presuppositional statement, right? And then
I don't know about all that.
I've been writing them down on paper, right? As I think about it, right?
Keep track here.
Well, I guarantee you could collapse a lot of those.
But you're saying all these things are presuppositions, but I'm not actually seeing how.
But hold on now. When you go even further, right, and you say the following sentence, I presuppose the Christian God as the necessary precondition for existence. You are presupposing you. You are presupposing that you exist. You are presupposing God. You are presupposing Christian God. You are presupposing that preconditions are necessary for existence. You are presupposing existence. You are presupposing that necessary preconditions are necessarily preconditional. Do you see how many presuppositions go into that?
That's only like 5 or 6.
Are you walking away from presuppositionalism, Kathleen?
Yeah, Kathleen, if you really changed your mind about presuppositionalism, they're awesome. I love people that change their minds.
I am in the process of making that decision. I had about a 40-minute conversation. I had a 40-minute conversation with somebody earlier today and worked a couple things out. I mean, I haven't divorced myself from it, right?
You know what's funny about that? Darth is the one that changed Presupp, and Darth is also probably the one that pushed you away from it.
Well, Darth was able to expose a lot of things to me, right? But no, like I think I wouldn't necessarily say walking away from it, Gigi. I would say more evolving it, right?
Look, even if it doesn't work for arguing for God, it still is awesome at ripping down apart an atheist worldview or anybody's worldview.
Oh yeah, that's all. But no, right? Because yeah, like I said, 97 presuppositions presupposing God, right?
Yeah, but to hit me with all of those at once would be kind of steamrolling, right? Like I can't analyze all of those in the
I understand. I understand you can't analyze them all, right? But this is the issue, right? is that what you need to recognize is that when you say, I presuppose God for X, you have not one presupposition. You have multiple presuppositions. And so a lot of the times when we just simply say, I presuppose God, as
some of those
the necessary
presuppositions-
precondition, right?
Yeah.
Why can an atheist not simply assert, I presuppose logic is a necessary precondition for intelligibility, and whether or not that is the precondition for life and existence, it is still the precondition for intelligibility. And if I can presuppose a necessary precondition for intelligibility, why can I not make intelligent statements? Because logic presupposes itself in order to be necessarily absolute.
Niggas from Detroit are 30% lead.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, but I feel like some presuppositions are more on a metaphysical level or ontologically prior to other presuppositions, and that the English and certain languages are complex enough for us to talk at that kind of meta level.
Take a look at the ones I just posted in the chat.
Then I would have to ask
that's all the presuppositions I have.
So, for example, I'm saying that God is my most fundamental presupposition.
Okay.
And so it's
Damn,
from
not in
that
chat.
presupposition that I make sense of the rest of my experience. And I think that it's a necessary condition to make sense of my experience. And what's interesting to me is some of you guys don't sound like you're atheists. Like, I don't know the name of the kind lady I was talking to earlier, but she just mentioned that she thinks this is a great way to, topple atheistic.
Wait a second, hold on, time out. Did you just say Gigi was the kind lady?
He was being sarcastic.
No, I was not being sarcastic.
I don't think he was. I don't think he was.
No, he definitely
was. I hope that got recorded. The kind lady. Gigi, that's what I'm referring to you from now on, the kind lady.
He was being sarcastic, but I am.
He said he wasn't.
Okay.
He said he
I
wasn't.
am an atheist. I just like to beat up my fellow atheists.
You like to beat up your fellow atheists with other... Okay.
She likes pointing out dumb arguments.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can actually do
love the way she
presupposition
does
better
it.
than any Christian. I can actually presupp atheists better than any Christian. Better than Dark.
I love the way I love the way Gigi precepts Christians. But you I love that.
I love the way she pronounces idiot.
What did I do with my cigarettes?
Yeah, you guys don't even know that
What did you say, Jovan? I didn't hear you.
I said that you didn't post it in the chat.
I would like to get some of your guys or y'all's opinion on.
I thought you said you posted it in chat, but I didn't see you post it.
What do you guys?
I wanted to look at it.
If y'all are interested, this is the guy who's got me interested in Eastern Orthodoxy quite a bit. So.
Jane Dyer.
He also is the guy who turned me off of William Lane Craig and all of
What's
that.
wrong with William Lane Craig?
Well, I think Jay makes a good point about a lot of his arguments not getting to the conclusion
All right.
he wants to reach to.
All right, hold on 1 second. So Van says these are all of his presuppositions: existence of mind-independent reality, validity of preserving character of logical deduction, reliability of induction, causation, concept of truth, existence of a mind, reliability of perception, senses, reliability of memory, concept of unified sense agent.
About causality.
Here he has that.
Oh, causality. Okay, 4.
So let's see here. Let me just write one of these down real quick. Existence. And then reality. That's 1, 2, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 presuppositions in that first sentence that I see.
What's your criteria for a presupposition? What makes a presupposition?
So, for instance, existence of a mind-independent reality. So your first presupposition is that you are presupposing that a mind actually exists. You are also presupposing the mind in and of itself. You are presupposing that there is a reality, and you are presupposing that the mind is independent of that reality.
So I guess what I'm trying to do is when you're looking at something and you say, okay, this is a presupposition of X.
Okay,
what makes
so
something a presupposition? I'm
so
not trying to like catch
when
you.
I speak,
Just curious.
no, when I speak of a presupposition, right? All right. Let's say we'll use a sentence. John stole the apple. Okay. I am presupposing, one, that there's a guy named John, because John stole the apple. I'm presupposing that there was an apple. I am presupposing that John had the ability to steal the apple. I'm presupposing that stealing the apple is a crime. So those are all presuppositions in that sentence.
So you think the best way to define a presupposition is to give examples of them? I mean, that's fair. That's fair. I'm just trying to figure out if that's.
I mean, there's like 13 different types of presuppositions, if I remember, 13 or 14 of them.
Kathleen, I'm because of presuppositionalism, I'm an epistemological nihilist. I don't think anybody can know anything.
Do you know that statement?
A presupposition is an assumption, or at least can be an assumption of understanding, right? So, like for instance, when I say John stole the apple, I am making an assumption that there was a person named John. Because if there's no person named John, then nobody stole the apple. But because the sentence says John stole the apple, we have to make the presupposition or assumption that there was a person named John. We also have to make the same thing about the apple, that a crime was committed, and so on and so forth. So like stole is entailment of the presupposition, or presuppositional trigger. I, am, we, were, there, are, them. There's presuppositional triggers in sentences that let us know that we are assuming something. So when I say I presuppose God, I am saying that I am making an assumption that there is a God. And I must assume that in order to carry my worldview forward, but it's not justified by anything. The only thing that it's justified in is my own internal faith, and faith is by its very nature unjustifiable. So then I am left with attempting to use coherentism as ability to justify my beliefs.
Are you defining faith as independent of evidence?
I'm defining faith as like, so for instance, angels don't have faith in God. They know of God because they've literally seen him.
Do you think that's the biblical definition of faith?
Belief in something that is unseen. Yeah, I do.
So if I asked you what word was translated faith, would you happen to know?
Greek or Hebrew?
Greek.
Not really, not off the back of my hand. I don't know how to pronounce it.
Would
I
you
can
happen to
spell
be?
it.
Would you happen to be familiar with the Greek god Pistis?
Yeah, like I said, I can't pronounce it.
Yeah, it's the
Pistis.
personification of trust. And so my understanding of faith in Scripture is trust and not necessarily just blind belief.
Okay, but have you ever seen God?
I think I have direct access with.
That's not what I asked you. Have you
Well, I
ever
mean,
seen
it depends. I mean, not with eyes, but with news, yes.
with news?
I think, yes, I think that we have direct access and contact with God in this reality.
I believe that too.
It's pronounced nose.
Nose? I've always heard people pronounce it news.
I was saying you could smell.
People's always
Nose, N-O-S-E. Yeah, no, I believe that too, right? However, that trust is based in the validity of the Scripture. The validity of the Scripture is based in the validity of the Word, which is Christ, because the Bible is, the Bible, it's not the Word. The Word is Christ.
Yeah.
So that is based in the validity of the Trinity, which is based in the validity of God. And all that trust is based in something that you cannot see, touch, hear, smell, taste. You trust in it. You trust in something unseen.
Well, when I say trust, I'm more talking about on a personal. It's not a.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm talking about more of the fact that I have two people staying at my house, and I'm going to let them sleep in here with my door locked. That's the type of. It's not based on blind faith that I'm letting these two guys sleep in the house. It's because I know who they are. I know their character.
Yeah. Look, I understand that, right? I'm not speaking of blind faith. God doesn't want blind faith. But your faith is still based in something that you can't justify. Faith is unjustifiable. You cannot use.
So are you saying all faith is in all of faith, like the faith I have in these two guys, or just faith in God? Unjustifiable.
All faith is unjustifiable.
So you don't.
It's not a justifiable claim. It's not a truth claim. It's a feeling. It's not a truth claim. You trust that those two guys are not going to wake up, beat you to death, and steal your things. And that's probably valid. There's probably a valid trust because, like you said, you know these guys. They're friends or whatever, right? So, the odds are, and that's valid trust, but it's not justifiable trust. You can't use faith to justify knowledge. Right? Like at the end of the day, you'll say the necessary.
Are we trying to
condition,
justify knowledge, or are we trying to justify our trust?
Well, you said you're trying to understand and run a transcendental argument for God. The transcendental argument presupposes that God is a necessary condition for rationality, intelligibility, cognition, things of that nature.
Predication.
The transcendental argument says that this worldview is valid because of the impossibility of the contrary, that no other worldview can provide the necessary preconditions for these things. That's what you're saying in your argument. That's right. That's the basis of the transcendental argument. Yeah. But your necessary precondition, God, that is not based in any kind of epistemic justification. It's based in an assumption.
I mean, isn't it?
And the only validation of that assumption is subjective. You, just as I, base your assumption of God in your personal experiences, in the general revelation, in the Word of God. But because my sensory perception is subjective, right? I believe in the infallibility of the Bible. I believe it's the infallible word of God. But that's a belief. I believe in the uniformity of nature because that is the way God has set it to be. But it's a belief. It's an assumption. I'm assuming my worldview in order to justify my worldview. It's the same thing that everyone else does, but it doesn't make your justification any more superior to theirs. Because like I said, even if we say that God is a necessary precondition, logic presupposes itself as a necessary element for its absoluteness. So the atheist has just as much ability to justify their knowledge as the Christian does, because they have access to logic too, even if they deny Christ.
But is it but it would also have to be coherent with what their idea of a person was. You can't just say I have access to logic, because we do in reality, and pretend that it's coherent with the rest of your beliefs. It's going to so what is a person on an atheistic worldview? And is that coherent?
You would have to ask. You would have to ask.
logic?
You would have to ask the individual atheist. There's a couple of them in the room. Why don't you ask them?
Yeah,
because I think some of them are going to have different answers.
But you don't think that?
I think Jovan might say something complete. I don't know, but I think Jovan might say something different than Chum. They're both atheists.
Yeah.
Some of them might say autonomy. Some of them might say agency.
But your idea of a transcendental argument it seems different from mine. I mean, didn't Aristotle kind of use this first in
Plato, not Aristotle. Aristotle's arguments were all centered around the primacy of existence.
Are you
not the primacy of consciousness?
Who wrote physics?
Right. The early church was Aristotelian, which is why the Catholic Church hired René Descartes, because Aristotle's natural philosophy was called into question. And if they said Aristotle's natural philosophy can be called into question, why can't we call into question all his other beliefs, which is the entire reason behind why they hired René Descartes?
But doesn't Aristotle in metaphysics, when he's talking to the sophists, doesn't he use a transcendental argument to justify the law of non-contradiction?
I never read Aristotle's metaphysics.
Like I said earlier, I have a terrible memory, but I believe there's let me see if I can.
I'm not going to say you're wrong because I never read the book. I read Politica.
But I think that in there, or maybe it was Plato, it was somebody, but they make the argument that when someone attempts to deny the law of non-contradiction, they're utilizing the law of non-contradiction.
Well, yeah, that's what the Christian says. The Christian says that anybody who attempts to say that they can assert knowledge is borrowing.
Yeah, but that's not an unjustified statement. That's a reductio ad absurdum.
Show me how.
Well, I mean, you're trying to show the other person that their own position leads into foolishness. And so I can't just show you. Well, I mean, with whose
let's
world?
Let's just assume, for argument's sake, that I am a materialist, and I hold that the law of logic is absolute, but that we are here through evolutionary processes, and God is not necessary for any of this stuff.
Okay, well, you just said that you were a materialist, and then said that you held an immaterial aspect of reality as an absolute. That's an incoherent statement.
No, it's not an incoherent statement because logic is simply a brute fact of nature. It is part of the uniformity of nature, and the uniformity of nature is observable, quantifiable.
Is that material?
What does it matter if it's material?
Well, you said you were a materialist.
Immaterial.
You said we were talking about a materialist, and so a materialist doesn't have room for this immaterial aspect of reality, like the numerical principles that we build bridges on. Because they're immaterial, dude.
What are you trying to tell me that in a non-God worldview that there's not more than one object? I don't need God to come to the conclusion, because I have the ability to think, and I have the ability to doubt, and I have access to logic. I do not need to presuppose God in order to know that there is more than one object in the universe. I can simply look and see that there are more than one objects in the universe. And even if I was being deceived and my universe is completely incoherent, because I can doubt, I can know certain things. And so I can know at least one thing. I can know that I exist and I know that my deceiver exists, which means that there's more than one thing.
On what basis can a materialist know that they exist? Their presuppositions don't allow for that.
A materialist can know they exist because they can doubt. You cannot call into question
that
existence.
That assumes that the thing that is doubting is them. That there's a self, that there's an agent, there's a person.
No, it doesn't. No,
of course it does.
No, it doesn't. It just asserts something out in the meta.
You can't say that the world is only material and then rely on absolute immaterial reality. How is that not? That's incoherent, dude.
How is that incoherent? Are you asserting that only material things can come from material things? Are you saying that transcendental things cannot exist in a material universe?
Man, you are extremely quiet.
What is your idea of materialism? Because my understanding is it's a universal claim that only material realities exist. It's a universal I'm sorry, go ahead.
My definition of materialism would be a universe that arises through material interaction.
Arises? Can you elaborate on it arises through material interaction? So you're not using materialism in the sense of a universal claim of material realities. Because you're trying to argue that immaterial realities come into being from material. Is that kind of where you're going with this?
Yeah. So look, when you say immaterial, you are just simply speaking of things that don't have substance, right? You're saying that words are immaterial. Language is immaterial. Communication is immaterial. Love is immaterial. Math is immaterial, right? But these are not immaterial in the same way that a rock is immaterial, right? These are byproducts of, for instance, language, the ability to speak, is a byproduct of the causation of evolution. Chemical interactions in neurons interacting in your brain, giving you the ability to think and speak and make noises and understand those noises. It all arises from an evolutionary process. Just simply because they do not have substance does not mean they do not exist.
At that point, how are you not going to argue that all of these things are merely illusory aspects? I mean, how are you going to escape determinism?
It doesn't matter if they're illusionary or not.
Well, if they're illusory, they don't actually exist. You don't actually doubt. It's not a true statement that you doubt if you're not actually there.
The fact that I have the ability to doubt at all
is the fact that you have the ability to doubt coherent with your view of what a human is.
Even if I run all the way to hard solipsism, even if I run all the way down to hard solipsism, and I assert that I can't know a damn thing except that I can doubt, right? My ability to doubt tells me that I have the ability to doubt. Let me rephrase that. That was stupid. I have the ability to doubt. Because I have the ability to doubt, I know that I can also, regardless of whether I am actually being deceived or not, know that there is something out there. Regardless of whether I can see it, touch it, feel it, taste it. I could be a brain in the vat. I could be living, I could be being deceived by the great deceiver. All those things. My entire universe could be completely illusory, right? But the fact that the doubter, the fact that the deceiver exists in order to deceive me tells me that something exists.
Well, this is Descartes, I think. Therefore, I am. That's kind of what you're trying to argue, but doesn't that
It's not even that. It's not even that. Descartes didn't say that there had to be something deceiving him, right? That isn't supported. That's not justified in Descartes' cogito.
No, I'm saying no.
But
no,
he
you're,
does
you're
use
right.
the evil demon experiment to get to that.
Well,
Right,
no,
but
to work to that conclusion.
But
This is
being
kind of where
just a
he's
thought
going.
experiment, that's not justified, right? You can't say something must exist because something's fooling me, because that's just a thought experiment. He's not saying there is a Cartesian demon that's fooling me, therefore something exists. He's saying
No, I get his
something-
point. His point is that I understand the point, dude. I think his point is that some. And if I misrepresent you, please let me know. But I think your point is simply that you think that because there is a thing that can be deceived, it must be. You can't have the conception of being deceived without. So even if you run to hard solipsism, is what you're saying, is there's still the fact that you could be wrong about everything shows that you exist.
Now,
Kind of, but
yeah,
I don't agree with that.
And is that thing material or immaterial? If we run it all the way down, is that thing material or immaterial? Is the soul material or immaterial? Is consciousness material or immaterial? Right. The issue that I have run into with the transcendental argument, right, is not necessarily. I mean, it is. Every argument has its flaws in it. Like every single argument has its flaws in it. Right? I'm not saying that that's what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is I have realized that my ability to justify my worldview using the transcendental argument is no greater than the foundational atheist.
True.
Well, what you're trying to say is that theirs is still as coherent. Do you think theirs is as coherent as yours? You said you were a coherentist earlier.
Well, do I think their worldview is as coherent as mine? No, of course not. Because they don't have God. But
why do you think that?
Coherentism is a system of justification. All you have to do is pop out the middle of the web and you have no justification whatsoever. Right? Like, I still like the Presupp argument. I just have some issues with it. I still think right now, at least, it's the best argument out there for God. But this idea now that this idea that I am going to assert that I have the ability to justify my worldview as superior to yours epistemically is ridiculous, because I can't. I have no greater means of asserting that my worldview is more justified than any atheists in this room's worldview.
Then why do you think? I mean, when you say that, I mean, you just told me you're a coherentist, which means when you say justified, you're talking about some form of coherence, and you just said theirs is less coherent than yours. So in some way, you do think it is more epistemically justifiable than theirs.
No. Because I am a coherentist, but that does not mean that they are. Most of them, to my knowledge, are foundationalists, axiomatic. My justification is built on a coherence of my beliefs. Their justification is built on a properly basic belief. Built up like a reversed pyramid.
Yeah. I mean, I used to be I mean, that's kind of where I used to be, so.
Well, and, you know, like earlier today when I was talking with Darth, right, I heard him say, well, I wasn't talking to Darth. He usually has me muted nowadays. But he said something about, you know, the foundation, the atheists will use some kind of philosoph talk. And they'll say something about blah, blah, blah. You know, and he's just dismissing basically, you know, 500 years of philosophy. And, you know, in fact, there's many, many, many great Christian philosophers who are axiomatic philosophers, foundational philosophers. So he's just, you know, going to dismiss them all out of hand as philosopher speak? It's a ridiculous notion.
Well, that's silly to do. I don't think you should just dismiss people offhand. That would be silly. But
right? Like I'm on your side, right? I'm a Christian. People, wonder about that because some of the things that I do and done and whatever, but it's irrelevant to the conversation. I'm with you. I truly believe God exists. I truly believe that He's merciful and wonderful and amazing. But I also believe in evolution. And I also don't see how a coherent justification is any more superior to a foundational justification. And at the end of the day, my assertion that my presupposition for God is anything more than an assumption based on, my own personal understanding, my own subjective, mind you, personal understanding of the world. I mean, that's just silly to say that that's more justifiable than any other person's subjective understanding of reality.
Well, I don't think that's the claim of most people, though. And maybe you're saying that's where their claim leads and they just don't see it, in your opinion. But it seems like most people are claiming that to deny this position is in fact a contradiction in some way. But it's not a very useful argument because they were pressing me for premises earlier. You can't give premises to someone who you have no idea what they actually believe reality is like, because this argument places paradigms against one.
What do you mean?
And
they
it
were
wants to
pressing you
compare
for premises?
Well, they were just asking me for an argument that's like premise 1 is this, premise 2 is that, this is the conclusion. And I don't think you can do that when you're trying to give a transcendental argument, because you're trying
absolutely
to use...
you can. The transcendental argument is built into...
Not if you don't know their worldview, right? Because...
It doesn't matter what their worldview is. The transcendental argument is built around a logical...
How are you going to give a reductio without knowing it?
The transcendental argument is built on a logical disjunctive syllogism. Of course you can give premises. Premises 1, either the Christian God exists or the Christian God does not exist. Premise 2, if one of these worldviews cannot account for the necessary preconditions of logic, intelligibility, and rationality, ad infinitum, insert platitude, then it is invalidated as a proper worldview and the other is validated. The atheist or non-Christian God worldview cannot account for the necessary preconditions for life, intelligibility, logic. It is invalidated. Conclusion, the Christian world is validated.
But
premises.
How do you do that without... Do you not think that you have to... You're taking a broad thing of God does not exist, and it doesn't seem like you can have a personal conversation with someone at that level. Because I could give that argument that you just gave, but I don't actually know what the person who doesn't believe in God believes about reality.
That's Van Til's argument. That is Bonson's argument. That is literally their argument, word for word.
Yeah, but
you are arguing from your worldview. That's what you're doing. You're arguing from your worldview and saying that because your worldview is the only valid worldview, that the other worldview will in fact not have the necessary preconditions for the ultimacy of reality.
But if the person you're talking to finds their own presuppositions to be just as valid, it's not going to do you any good.
Then
so that's what I'm saying. I think you have to be able to talk to them, get their worldview in order to establish a reductio against them. And if they're not willing to do that, you obviously can't have that conversation.
I'm not saying don't talk to them, mate, but when you said you can't give premises, you absolutely can give premises. That's what you said. I can't give premises. I just gave you the premises.
I'll concede that was a stupid way of wording what I said, what I was trying to say.
When you say they can give presuppositions that they hold to be valid, well, I can say I presuppose that there's, a unicorn dancing around in my living room right now. Are you telling me that you can't show that that is an absurd presupposition?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that unless I've talked to a person and know their beliefs, I can't formulate a reductio ad absurdum, which is is a type of argument where you try to assume their position, right? I can't assume their position.
I know
if
what
I
a
don't
reduction
know.
argument is.
Well, I'm just saying. Well, is it not fair to say that I can't assume their position if I don't know what it is? That's my whole. That's all I'm saying.
Why would you ever assume their position?
Because that's the whole point of a reductio, is to assume their position and show that it leads to an absurd result.
You don't need to assume their position in order to show their position is absurd. You can show their position is absurd in your own worldview, right? Because in your worldview, in my worldview, if they presuppose anything that does not revolve around the nature of God, their worldview is automatically incoherent.
Yeah, that's actually one of the problems with your worldview there, Kathleen.
What'd you say there? What'd he say?
Any worldview that does not presuppose the Christian God is by its very nature incoherent and absurd. That is the whole premise behind that's the whole point of the presuppositional argument.
But hold on, let me go grab something real quick.
Is that what you gave earlier, Kathleen? The one is validated, the other's validated thing?
Yeah, A or B, not B, therefore A.
Well, that assumes that there can be justifications for logic and
well, that was the point earlier that I made, right? Is this idea that I can assert that my worldview,
Wait, Kathleen.
That's the either or fallacy.
Sorry,
isn't
you're
it?
echoing.
Sorry, you're echoing. Sorry.
No, Jovan, what I said prior to this, right? Because he had made the claim that he couldn't make premises to you guys. I said absolutely you can.
No. I'm having a problem with what you said. The only way you're going to be able to say what you said is if you say it's either God or not God. It's not. Well, it's not God. Therefore, it's God. But you're going to end up having the fucking.
No. It's not. It's not a not God argument.
Am I still echoing?
No.
No.
The reason that
that's the
of ludic.
That's the either or fallacy.
Yeah.
No, it's not. It's not a not
It's
God.
literally the either or fallacy.
Well, no, that's not the either or fallacy. But the problem. Go ahead and say what you're going to say then, Kathleen.
The argument, the transcendental argument, is the logical argument in logical form says A or B, not B. Therefore, A.
Yeah,
no, it's not A or B. It's A or not A.
Can you determine that it is either A or B?
It is not.
That's
A
not true,
not
Kathleen.
Otherwise, it's not. No, it's A or not A because it's not a true dichotomy.
If you can't establish that those two claims are those two things are mutually exclusive, then you can't say either or.
Hold on. Because you guys are just wrong, but hold on one second.
No, you're definitely wrong on this one, Kathleen. This has already been pointed out to Matt Slick, the creator of the argument.
Matt Slick didn't create the argument.
Well, it's going to be Matt's transcendental argument, which is basically the same.
Yeah, but we all know Matt Slick's a freaking retard.
Yeah, but you're using what he used.
He is a retard. Him and Cy are both.
But I'm not making an A or not A argument.
That's what you want to make.
Yeah, you said either God accounts for it or God doesn't account for it.
That's the good one. That's the one that you want to make.
That's
you want to say either A or not A. If you say if it's either A or B, and that you don't establish that they're exclusive.
Right. It's.
What do you mean if I don't establish that they are exclusive? They are exclusive by establishment of the first premise.
So if A is ponies and B is not ponies, you can establish that those are mutually exclusive. You can't have one and the other, and you can't have some other option. It's either one or two. It's either A or B. But if you can't establish that it's either A or B, and you say it's either A or B without establishing that there's a reason for that, then you're committing the either or fallacy.
Hold on one second.
Would it be right
The idea, the idea is the negation of one of the worldviews. There are multiple
does not equal validation for the other unless you establish that they're exclusive.
Well, what's interesting is, do you think that if you take one element or aspect of a worldview, show that it's incoherent, that you've now negated the entire worldview? Or do you think that you've just negated that one aspect?
Say that again now.
If you have one aspect of your worldview, for example, which you could show that it's like incoherent or it leads to some contradiction or something, I don't think you've negated the whole worldview. You've negated that certain aspect of that worldview.
It would depend on how fundamental it is to the worldview. So, for example, if they found Jesus' body tomorrow, it wouldn't make much sense for me to be a Christian.
It's very true.
So it would depend on how fundamental that presupposition is, or that whatever the claim is.
Oh, sure, but that's the point, though. That's if you have it, like, you would just be negating, first of all, the Jesus aspect, but in that case, it would be one of the fundamental things of.
Yeah, and so I couldn't be a Christian, but maybe I could be a generic theist.
I mean, I don't.
Or a deist, or.
Yeah, I don't know that even finding the body
but that would
of
still
Jesus,
destroy
quote unquote, would. Yeah, I don't think it would, though, because first of all the Christians wouldn't think that it was Jesus, and then you could still find ways to reconcile that. Like, you could say, "Oh, the devil, the devil's deceiving us," or God, God's testing us.
Yeah, but the hypothetical was that we've for sure disproven a particular claim, and does it negate the entire worldview? And my point was simply that it depends on, if you've actually negated it, it depends on how fundamental it is to the worldview, whether it would make it collapse or not.
Right.
That's my only point. And I do think that if we 100% sure negate the fact that Jesus was not bodily resurrected, then the mainstream versions of Christianity go down.
Like, assuming that, let's say someone's worldview can't account for knowledge, then being able to account for knowledge, I think, is independent of whether or not they can have knowledge.
I would agree with that entirely.
Statements.
I would agree with that entirely.
I mean, it's possible.
I mean, it's the same thing for morals, right? I think that's a big thing. Probably not between you guys. You guys are all.
I'm not a moral realist.
What are you? Just out of curiosity.
Well, I think morals are subjective, dependent on more like culture, time, and place, than actual some kind of morality. Morals are people's opinions.
So moral claims are claims about individual states of minds, is what you believe.
States of minds?
Yeah, when you make a moral claim, it's a claim about your personal subjective state of mind. It's not a claim about reality.
Well,
other than the fact that you exist in reality and your current state is what it is, but it's not a claim about some aspect of the world. It's a claim about how you internally feel.
Yeah, it's like your opinion. It's your opinion of something.
So it's not a truth. There's no true moral claims on that.
Well, if
there's no objective moral truth, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's no moral truth claims on that world.
So I just
or on that view of ethics.
I just put something in the chat, right, with the A or B. Right, it's not a very good example, but it was just the best thing I could come up with on the fly. It's not an A or not A, it's an A or B.
Say, what if it's either planes or tarantulas have 4 legs?
The whole point of this particular syllogism is that there is only two options in the syllogism.
Right.
Right.
Are you going on about the disjunctive syllogism right now?
Yes.
But
Okay.
supposing the options in premise 1 were tarantulas and planes, you could form the same conclusion, but the conclusion would be false.
Well, the deal with the disjunctive syllogism is that you only have two options, and one of the options is true. It's not implicit that it's true, it's just understood that it's true.
Yeah. Right, it's a singular argument, right?
That's actually one of the main things that makes the tag argument false.
Well, a disjunctive syllogism can be false.
I think
the way the disjunctive syllogism works is it's set up so one of the options is true.
Yeah, I mean you can have
Well, my bad. What I'm trying to get at is, like, if you say either P or Q, it could be the case that it's neither. So that would be false.
Well, in which case it wouldn't be a disjunctive syllogism.
Yeah, it would be a what is it? A false dichotomy? Maybe using it there.
Well, I think
it's not a correct syllogism. Right, like when the transcendental argument runs its things, right? The transcendental argument is assuming, right? It's not the transcendental argument.
Comes out. The other poop was out, huh? And then they eat the poop.
Oh, that's a classic.
That's the Ugandan guy, right? Doing the sex education thing.
Yeah. Oh, I missed that guy.
What I meant is the first premise in the disjunctive.
So listen though, the disjunctive syllogism, the transcendental argument doesn't assume. The transcendental argument assumes that one of the two stated worldviews is correct. It doesn't come out and say that God, in the first premise, it doesn't say that the Christian God is the true worldview. It says either the Christian worldview is true or the other worldview is true.
Yeah, but that could be incorrect.
That's where it's not a disjunctive syllogism because there's not an other worldview.
What do you mean, an other worldview?
There are a multitude of other worldviews.
Right, but that's why I said it's a singular argument, right? It's meant to go one worldview at a time.
You're having the same problem.
The arguer and the interlocutor's worldview.
Good morning, everyone. My name is...
No, because it could be neither of your worldviews.
Yeah, that's where you run into the problem. And that's one of the reasons why...
Kathleen, just look at it like this. What if two atheists with different worldviews both use that same thing? Are you going to say one of them's right?
Let me jump in for a second, Jovan. Kathleen, have you seen Alex Malpass's deconstruction of the tag?
I think it's on my list of things to watch.
I would encourage you to watch it because he went out of his way to show that either it begs the question,
and he showed it directly to Slick.
Yeah, it showed that the tag is sunk.
Well, so I mean, R.C. Sproul said that the transcendental argument not only begs the question but gives a logical equivocation.
I messaged you the link.
That would actually point me in the direction of saying, so why do you hold to it?
Whose refutation did y'all mention? Sorry.
Alex Malpass and also...
Someone have a link to the original Hangout?
Oh, the Hangout? I'm linking his blog.
Oh, the blog is great because he actually links to the original Hangout in that.
All right. Well, I messaged it to you too.
Another person, if you're looking for refutations of the transcendental argument, who does an amazing job is Donson Bethrick. It's known as the Bonson burner.
So if they're able to show why the tag is sunk, why do you still think it's a good argument?
I'm in the process of actually rethinking my arguments.
Let's see. I have a link up here too.
Good,
There's a thing
good.
called the Tang, the transcendental argument for the non-existence of God, and it uses the same formulation of that Tag uses.
Yeah, that's the point.
Yeah, like I mean, I've been developing more and more issues with the transcendental argument every single day.
But do you get the problem with saying either my do you get the problem with saying either my worldview or your worldview is correct?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Right, but the reason that I was even saying any of this is when I was speaking to I don't even know how to pronounce your name, bud.
Perichoris.
Say that again.
Just call him Perry.
It has to do with the Trinity, so he probably would be something to talk to about.
Oh God.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear about soul particles.
Perry the platypus.
That's a contradiction in terms. It's not fun to talk to anybody about that.
So that's what you call me, you know? That or...
Yeah, no, I was just, I was talking to him just strictly about the transcendental argument, and the reason that the premises thing came up, right, is because I was trying to show him that he can, in fact, give premises for the transcendental argument.
What I was trying to say,
premises.
What I was trying to say is that I can't assume my opponent's position without knowing something about their own worldview. And I think
but if you're going to be having
to approach somebody is to first show them that their presuppositions are wrong. Like if somebody wants to knock down my position, they should show me how my presupposition in God does not make sense of reality.
Right.
That's how they should attack the presuppositions.
But let's just say that a person doesn't have a fully integrated worldview, right? And they just say that, like, so for instance, Tom Dynamic, right? Tom Dynamic's worldview is just basically that he doesn't really know how a lot of this stuff happened, but he knows that he knows that logic is absolute. His presupposition for knowledge is logic is absolute. If he presupposes logic as a necessary precondition for intelligibility, and then he says that logic presupposes itself as a necessity for its absoluteness, then he can make intelligent claims. And you cannot say that he cannot, because your worldview holds logic to be absolute as well. So then you're both on equal footing when it comes to the epistemic justification of knowledge.
Did you enjoy your talk with Michael? I thought that was
yeah, it was great. Great. We went on to have like a hour-long conversation one-on-one.
Kinky.
Yeah, it was really kinky. Oh. No, he's a good guy. He's able